When I was young, the world was bipolar. There were two great powers on the planet. One was the United States, and obviously the Soviet Union was the other great power. And the US-Soviet competition defined international politics in large part during the Cold War. Then the Soviet Union disappeared in December 1991, and we entered the unipolar moment. We went from a bipolar world to a unipolar world. And I would argue that around 2017, that unipolar world came to an end, and we moved into a multipolar world. We went from a world where the United States was the only great power on the planet to one where the United States, China, and Russia were all great powers. So we now have three great powers. And this is the first time that we have faced a multipolar world since World War II. And of course, the change in US-China relationship has also been huge. During the unipolar moment, when the United States was the only great power on the planet, US-China relations were generally very good. Then, when we went from unipolarity to multipolarity, which meant China was now a great power, it was a peer competitor of the United States, relations between the United States and China fundamentally changed and became much more conflictual.
So do you believe the US foreign policy is contributing to the global stability or fostering chaos?
I think it's fostering chaos. If you have to choose between those two descriptions, I think it's fostering chaos in Ukraine, and I think it's fostering chaos in the Middle East. I think the United States should have acted in fundamentally different ways in both the Middle East and in Ukraine. The principal cause of the war in Ukraine was the West's efforts to bring Ukraine into NATO. And the United States was the driving force behind that decision. And the Russians made it clear from the very beginning that was unacceptable. But nevertheless, we continued to push and push and push to bring Ukraine into NATO. The United States is helping the Israelis to cause greater and greater trouble in the Middle East. So if anything, if you look at our performance on the world stage, we have been fostering chaos, not contributing to international stability. I've long argued that once China rose and once China became powerful, the United States would move in to make sure that China didn't become too powerful. This is the tragedy of great power politics. And this just happens with great powers. It's not peculiar to China or peculiar to the United States. You know, a lot of Chinese think that the root of the problem here is American behavior. The Americans are the bad guys. Many Americans think the root of the problem is the Chinese are the bad guys. This is not my view. This is just how international politics works when you have two very powerful states. They're going to end up fearing each other, and they're going to end up competing with each other. And there's no way around that. Well, first of all, as I said, I don't think the root of the problem is Chinese behavior. I don't think the Chinese are the bad guys and the Americans are the good guys. I think this is just how international politics works. And although I'm an American and I'm rooting for the Americans, the fact is that this is a case of a tragic situation. So that would be my first point. My second point is, I actually think it's very important that people hear my argument and think about it. You don't have to agree with me, but it's just very important to understand the argument. Because I think if you're interested in making sure that this security, well, let me put it differently, if you're interested in maximizing our prospects of avoiding a hot war, right? I think understanding the nature of the conflict really matters. I think we already have an intense security competition. I think it's been somewhat dampened by the fact that the United States is pinned down in Ukraine and pinned down in the Middle East. I think if the United States was not pinned down in Ukraine and in the Middle East, the security competition in East Asia would be more intense, the enmity would be greater. I think that moving forward, this security competition is not going to go away. And as I said a couple times, I think it is likely that we will have some major crises in the decades ahead. I hope that if we do have crises, that the leaders on both sides can manage those crises and we can avoid a war. What would prove me wrong is if we had good relations. In other words, if China could rise peacefully, right? In other words, my theory was wrong. Let's hope that I'm wrong.